you. She used to be a member of the Fresno group. Okay, Barbara.
Thank you, Dorothy. Hi, everybody. My name is Barbara. And I am a very, very grateful member of Alanon. And I think that I can call myself an Alanon because I attend meetings, I have a sponsor, I am a sponsor to people, I read the literature, and I try to be of service. So I think that's what makes me an Alanon. It's not somebody else that did it. I did it. And I want to thank the committee very much for inviting me to come and speak. I'm glad they got the PA system fixed because I really didn't want you to miss any of this. It's really a pleasure to be here, to be invited to come and talk with you. I came into Alanon. I was living in Lemoore. I grew up in the little town of Stratford and went to high school in Lemoore and moved to the big city of Lemoore. And that's where I was when I came to Alanon, and they wouldn't have invited me anywhere. I was not a nice person when I got here. So you'll hear about that. So it's been quite a journey, and it really is a pleasure to be invited to come and share with you today. To the Alateens, when you get your water put together, I'd like a bottle of water, and here's my $1. I think it's $1. Are there any newcomers with us today? Anybody who's been in Alanon about 3 months or less or so? Raise your hand. All right, well, we might have a couple of people that don't want to admit it. I didn't want to admit it. I didn't admit it. When I attended my first Alanon meeting, they asked me if I was new, and I said no. And they asked me if I wanted some literature, and I said no. I certainly didn't want anybody to think I didn't know everything, because I thought I knew everything. And I had been letting people know everything that I knew for quite a while, especially the guy that I lived with who drank a lot. I let him know about that a lot. All my expertise on alcoholism. And one of the terms that I hear in Alanon a lot nowadays is my qualifier is, and then somebody will say their mom or their dad or their husband or their kid or whatever. That's a treatment facility kind of word. It's come into Alanon despite our best efforts to keep it out. And so I like to say that I am my qualifier. I am the one that did what I did and thought what I thought and said what I said. It wasn't anybody else. It was my reaction to other people. I lived with someone long enough who drank enough for me to get crazy enough to qualify for Alanon. So I'm my qualifier. And I got to tell you, I absolutely love alcoholics. I am attracted to them like flies to a big cow patty. I walked into my home group in Hanford one night, and one of the gals was in the midst of a messy divorce, and they were talking about, they would never ever have anything to do with an alcoholic again. And I listened for a little while, and I said, I will. I know I will. They're exciting. You know, normal people are... I had a normal boyfriend when I was in college, and I dumped him for the exciting guy with the motorcycle that drank a lot. You know, why would I want somebody that goes to work in the morning and comes home in the evening and is dependable? What would I do with all my thinking time? So anyway, like I said, I grew up here in the San Joaquin Valley, and when I was talking to people about this deal, they said, so where are you going this weekend? I said, I'm going home. This is still home. When I come to the San Joaquin Valley, it's home. You know, I lived here forever. I was third generation to graduate from my high school. My daughter was fourth generation to graduate from my high school. But just somehow, like so many people from the valley, I wound up on the coast. And I live in Arroyo Grande, which I don't usually tell people because nobody knows where it is. So I say I'm from Pismo Beach. Everybody knows where Pismo Beach is. I could go to the middle of nowhere and Morocco or something, and I could say Pismo Beach and they would know where it is. Same thing with when I was growing up, and I'd never told anybody I grew up in Stratford because nobody knows where that is unless they live here and they drive to the coast and they sort of remember they drove by that place. So I always would say I was from Fresno. But so when I started in Alanon, I went to a lot of meetings. My home groups were in Hanford and Lemoore. I got into service right away and started hanging out with the gang in Fresno, and there's still a whole bunch of them here today. And it's just wonderful to come home and have my family here. It's a great family reunion. So I lived with a guy who drank. I met him when he flew his jet airplane off of an aircraft carrier into Lemoore Naval Air Station, and I met him on the tarmac. Had never met him before. We'd exchanged a couple of letters. And within, 10 seconds of meeting him, we both had a drink in our hands. It was time for celebration. They had made a successful crew. They were home. The ones that came home were alive. They weren't in a prisoner of war camp. They were happy to be home, of course, and the party was on. So we partied. I mean, that's what we did. We were celebrating and having escaped. They were celebrating having escaped death. I was celebrating just was fun. I'm not an alcoholic. I have never had any question about that. When I came to Alanon, I went to a lot of open AA meetings, and they used to say that they were going to get me, but alcohol just doesn't do it for me. It doesn't hold any solutions for me. So I just drank because everybody else was drinking, and then I just didn't drink. In fact, I got a job one time that required that I not drink. It was with the recovery program, and my husband was just astounded that I would take that job. You can't drink. I'm like, yeah, so it just didn't matter to me. So anyway, I met him, and he was neat. He was exciting, and I always used to joke about, Navy pilots, that they fly jet airplanes. They laugh hard, they party hard, they're like a big fraternity, and they wear flight suits that have zippers that zip from the top, and they also zip from the bottom, which was something I was interested in at that time. A lot. Not that I'm not still, but more so then than now. And we had a whirlwind courtship, because they were only going to be home for a very short period of time, and then they were going to deploy again. They really were home a very short period of time. I met them, I think it was February it was February when they flew in, and they deployed again in August. So we partied from February to August. We got married in August. That makes a lot of sense. And then he left on deployment. In fact, that reminds me of my favorite Alanon joke. How do you know that an Alanon and an alcoholic are on the second date? By the U-Haul that's in the driveway. We tend to do these kinds of things. So he left, and that sort of set the pattern for our life. My daughter and I sat down one time on our wedding anniversary, which, by the way, is today. I'm not married. Our marriage did not survive recovery or retirement because my daughter and I sat down this one anniversary that I was having, and we figured out how much time he'd been home and gone, and we figured out that he had been home 50% of the time that we had been married. I think that's the only reason that I was able to survive alcoholism for as long as I did. Because if it had been in my face every day for the 17 years that we were together, I would have killed him. I definitely would have killed him. Some people in Alanon are suicidal. Not me, baby. Why would I hurt myself? No, they have to die. So this talk today is probably going to be kind of disjointed. Usually, I don't talk often, but usually when I talk, I give three talks. I give one on the way to talking, and then I give the talk to you all, and then I give the really good talk on the way home. So if you give me your cell phone numbers, I'll do a group call on my way home, and since I'll just be driving and we'll talk. But I didn't do that today for some reason, and I thought, oh, well, I'll just let God be in charge of this talk. That's the way it's supposed to work anyway. When he came back from the second deployment, we got orders to his next duty station. And when we moved there, because the war was over, it was 1972, if you remember, that's when we ended it. We just gave up. And I thought that, now it's time to behave like regular people. And yeah, you have cocktails, Wednesday is happy hour. I mean, it's a happy hour time at the club. And then Friday nights and the weekends are party time. But otherwise, you go to work in the morning and you come home at night. That was not our story. I did not understand that alcoholism is a disease. My sponsor, Helen, God rest her soul, would really want me to stress the fact that alcoholism is a disease. It's just not a very respectable disease. That's why everybody keeps thinking, yeah, but if they really wanted to sober up, they could. They can't. It takes some sort of intervention, something greater, some force greater than we are. So the drinking in our house continued to progress. And my disease around alcoholism continued to progress. I sort of came by it naturally, but I'm just sort of a bitch. And I can tell you that being a bitch is progressive also. I was much more of a bitch after 17 years than I had been when I met him. Now, it was his fault. Do not tell me that I need to do anything because it was his fault. So we had an awful lot of stuff going on in our house. Sometimes we're good, sometimes we're not so good. We had a lot of great parties. We had some really not good parties. I was raising a child in this environment. It was very confusing to her. There was a lot of inappropriate behavior that went on. I know one time somebody came out of the part of the house into where everybody was partying, and all they had on was their flight jacket. Now, you all know flight jackets just come to your waist. So if you're not wearing any clothes, it's not really very modest dress. But they just come walking out. I mean, and this kind of stuff went on in our house all the time. And it was not the right place to raise a child. But I was doing the best that I could. I thought I was doing okay. I thought, if I sleep on the floor in front of her room at night, then the drunks can't accidentally stagger into her room and pass out on the bed, Really, really, really good thinking. I'm not your average high school graduate. I come up with ideas like that. That's kind of the distorted thinking that comes with this disease. I had distorted thinking really good. So we continued to do this dance, read the merry-go-round called denial, and there's our story. We only had 3 people in the house, him and me and my daughter, so there weren't enough people to play all those roles, but there were 3 people who played some of those roles really well. After 17 years, I had done everything that I could do to get him to stop. I had poured liquor down I did everything that's in the book. I poured liquor down the sink. I marked the bottles to see if how fast they were going down. I searched the house for his alcohol, because he could go into a room and be there like reading a book or on the computer or something, and he could come out drunk. Like, where is the booze? And for some reason, I felt I had to see it to make it real. The fact that he was staggering and could hardly speak, was not proof enough. And I was always going to take the video recorder and film him and show him what he looked like. My husband is brilliant. He is a brilliant, brilliant man, and clever and witty. But when he drinks, his IQ drops to about 55. And I hated it. I can remember telling him one day when he was going to work, I said, I'm really jealous of the people that you work with because they get you sober. They get the real you. I just get the drunk you. And I treated him terribly. there's not another sick person in my life that I treated like my husband. There's no one in my life who has been ill with a terminal disease. Alcoholism is a terminal disease. It's terminal in all of us. If we don't get treatment, we will die too. We die of heart attacks and high blood pressure and suicide and strokes and distracted driving because we're thinking about them, while we're driving. And one time I was driving the freeways in LA and I was having blackout thinking. I was just not even in the car. I was thinking. I was divorcing him in my head. And when I came to, I looked around. I did not know where I was. Blackout thinking. So I could have had an accident and never even know that I was driving. But I treated him like no one who I've ever treated who was ill. My grandmother had a stroke when I was about 13, and she had many physical attributes that were very much like my husband when he was drinking. She peed her pants. She slurred her speech. Her memory was very repetitive. I got tired of listening to the stories. All of this stuff was the same as alcoholism, but hers was okay. She had had a stroke. That's a respectable disease. So I never shamed her. I was never angry at her. I never went into her bedroom when she was sleeping and ripped the covers off and lectured her about her disease. I never treated her as if she simply did not exist. That was one of my favorite things with him. When he was drunk, I just decided, you're just not here. And he could be standing here and I could be talking to someone there as if he weren't there, just through him. He was just an invisible person. I can't even imagine what that feels like. No one has done that to me. So that's what I was up to when I got here. I decided that I didn't want to lose my marriage. I loved him. I loved my marriage. I loved our lifestyle. And everything that I had tried had not worked to make him stop so that I could feel better. That's all I wanted. If he would just stop drinking, we could live happily ever after. It's all his fault. All this behavior I'm describing to you is my behavior, but it wasn't my fault because it was his drinking that made me do it. But by the way, when I did my first fourth step, that's exactly what it was like. What he did and why I had to behave the way I behaved because of what he did. That's not exactly the directions that are given to us for the fourth step, but most people do it with a sponsor, but not me. So my last gasp at trying to control and manage his drinking, and I didn't want him to quit entirely. I couldn't imagine our lives without alcohol. I just couldn't. I just wanted him to drink like a normal man. I set up an intervention with him. There was a guy in Fresno named Father Bernie who was a wonderful sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had had an intervention done on him. And he talked about it when he was an AA speaker, and it obviously had worked. So I decided I needed to talk with him and find out how that happened, because if I got it from somebody that it worked for, then I could set one up and it would work. So he did help me. He put me in touch with a person who was a facilitator for such functions. And a group of us ambushed my husband one Saturday morning. The best time to get them is when they have a really good hangover. For some reason, that Friday night, he didn't drink at all. Probably the first time in 10 years he had not had a drink on Friday night, because by the time we did this intervention thing, he was drinking into a blackout on a daily basis. And one thing about an alcoholic blackout, which is just like my blackout thinking, you can tell them the next day that they did stuff that they didn't do, and they won't argue because they don't know. So I was a very good liar. I guess I'm also a marvelous storyteller, because I would make up stories about terrible things that he had done. And in fact, I don't know if I ever told him I did that. I have made amends to him, but I might have left that part out. I might have forgot. But yeah, he just listened while I told him about these despicable things that he did, immoral things. And he was a very, very moral man. So we did the intervention. Oh, this is funny. I got it all set up. I'm running and gunning, and I'm doing my thing, and I'm making it happen. Now, he's in the Navy. It's not like somebody in the Navy can just decide to go someplace. Like, I guess I'll go into treatment. without orders. I had this all set up, and about 4 days ahead of time, I thought, oh my God, he's going to need orders. He can't just show up at Navy Hospital Long Beach. He's got to have orders to go there. So then I had to talk to his boss. I didn't want anybody to know what was going on. Yeah, like they didn't know he was a drunk. And he was working for the admiral at the time, so you may as well just go to the top and get it handled. And I managed to pull it off. And was my husband angry. Because whether he wanted to go into treatment or not did not matter, because now there were orders. And also I had injected myself into his work environment. And there had always been a very clear line, that was not my place. I was supportive, but I was not to interfere in his career, which I think is a fine boundary. I just didn't obey it. So off he goes to Navy Hospital Long Beach. And the Navy at the time, I don't know if they still do, they would treat the entire family for the disease of alcoholism because they know it is a family disease. If one person has it, everybody's got it. So I was able to go to Navy Hospital Long Beach also for treatment. And I really wanted my daughter to go because I knew she had been impacted very greatly by this disease, but she wasn't having any of it. She'd had enough of this crap. And it's a 6-week program, but I was very important at this point in my life. I was very important. I was running a lot of things. A lot of things in life weren't the way I thought they should be. So I was rearranging as much of the world as I could to be the way that I thought it needed to be. Now, if any of you have worked the steps, you know that one of the goals of the steps is for us to adjust ourselves to what is, instead of trying to change what is to adjust to us, which is what I was doing a lot of when I came here. I had gotten myself elected to my city council. I think it was the mayor at the time, I can't remember. I was, running the city, nothing was right. Everything had to be fixed, and that took up a lot of my time, and I was working, and the office needed organizing, and I was running everything. So I felt I just didn't have enough time to go for the full 6-week program, but since there was nothing wrong with me, I didn't really need to go anyway. I simply went to support him and to find out what I needed to do when he came home to make sure that he stayed sober. So I allowed them 3 weeks. And in the 3 weeks that I was at Navy Hospital Long Beach, I found Alanon. They didn't, I know now that they didn't know what to do with me when I showed up, because I also interjected myself into the running of the treatment program. I'd read a lot of books about alcoholism, no Alanon stuff, but, other self-help things, and, I was just an expert on everything. If I was out to dinner and I heard somebody discussing something about dinner, I would turn around and tell them what they probably ought to order. I mean, I was in everybody's life. It's embarrassing to think about it. So I show up at Navy Hospital Long Beach, and I want to immediately meet with the head of the program to see if they're doing the right thing, and they don't understand they need to know things about my husband so they can do the right thing with him. Blah, blah, blah. They met with the head of the recovery program at the time was a woman, and commander, I think, and she met with me and listened very patiently. And now when I replay that scene, I'm like, oh my God. Oh, I can't believe I did that. But she was nice. She didn't say, you're really crazy. But I was really crazy. So while I was in the hospital, what they did with me, I was doing everything that all the sailors had to do. We had to, every morning we had to make our beds and clean our rooms, and we had other chores around the hospital. We had to sweep the floors, or we maintain, it's like a ship. You maintain the ship, although we're not on the water. So the sailors and me, and there were a couple of other Alanon gals there too, were helping to maintain the ship. And I was complaining, like one day I had to wash the toilets, and I'm like, oh, my nails, yeah, and they don't care. But And then in the morning, we had group therapy, and in the afternoon, we had physical, PT. Everybody in the Navy, you got to be fit all the time. And then in the evening, everyone's taken out in a bus to a meeting. And they had lots of people with different addictions there, and they had a lot of vehicles, so they could take them to whichever program they needed to go to. There were overeaters, and there were gamblers, and there were coke. And when you're in Long Beach, you would not believe the recovery that's there. There is so much different kind of recovery in Long Beach. So every addiction has a program for it, which is great, because you need to be with the people that are your people. But they took me to meetings off and on during the day. Sometimes they would take me to a morning meeting, and then maybe a meeting right after lunch, and sometimes an early evening meeting. And I thought, it was just me in the bus and some poor sailor they got stuck with driving me around. And I thought, they understand how important I am. Got my own driver, So they took me to Alanon. They took me to CODA. They took me to Adult Children of Alcoholics, Emotions Anonymous, Parents of Alcohol. I mean, there were just so many 12-step meetings, and I didn't like any of them except Alanon. I just liked Alanon. I know now what I liked about it. I liked that we had no labels. I had 1 million labels when I got here. I was a mother, I was a secretary, I was a wife, I was a mayor, I was 1 million things when I got here. But in Alanon, I'm just Barbara. I'm no better than anyone else, and I'm no less than anyone else. It is the place that I fit. And I just felt it. And when I was in the meetings, when I would get in the meetings, everybody would be laughing and scratching like we were today. And I would just be like, say the prayer, let's go, let's say the prayer, let's go. I was so anxious to have the meeting. And I thought I didn't want to be there, I was very resistant to doing anything about Barbara. My focus was so much on him and what he was doing that there's nothing wrong with me. I also had no emotions by the time I got to Alanon, except one. I was just pissed off. Sometimes I say I was angry, but it was beyond that. I was just majorly ticked all the time. If I came in a room, I kind of stormed in the room, slammed the door, I slammed the door of the car, I slammed phones. I mean, it was emanating this anger because this disease made me so mad. I thought it was him that was making me mad, but it's the disease of alcoholism, and it still really makes me mad. I hate this disease. I hate seeing what it does to wonderful, kind, loving, intelligent, talented, useful people, and it just destroys them and everything around them. I hate this disease. It's not the person that's doing it. It's the disease doing it to the person and to everyone around the person. So I was angry. And when I moved from here to the coast, the meeting that I started attending with my sponsor at Monday night at Atascadero, Alanon, had a greeter at the door, and I would just greet her with a stiff arm. Don't touch me. Don't hug me. That was the message I was giving. I didn't hug. I didn't want to be touched. I was like this all the time. So I loved Alanon. But I didn't know it. I was told, I didn't hear anything about God when I got here. And that's a good thing, because I had been mad at God since my grandmother had had her stroke. I had been asking God to make my grandmother well ever since, and he didn't. Of course, she didn't do anything. She did not do physical therapy. She didn't watch her diet. She didn't do anything. So I know now she couldn't get well, whether God wanted her to be well or not. So I was really on the outs with anything like a higher power. And so I didn't hear anything about God when I first went to meetings, or else I would have been out the door in a hot minute. What I heard, I came to the program in October 21st, 1989. Gratitude. Well, the topic tonight will be gratitude. Well, I certainly had nothing to be grateful for, but it sort of was okay because I was so mad at everything else I could be mad about having the topic of gratitude. But see, Thanksgiving was coming, so this gratitude crap went all the way through November. It was something else. And, but I was supposed to every day for my group therapy director wanted me to write down, I think it was 3 feelings that I had had during the day and what I did about them. I couldn't come up with any. Just angry, and what I did about it, I threw a rock or I broke the window or whatever I did. So they gave me a list of words. It was a single piece of paper with 3 columns on it, and all the words described emotions. Because I couldn't come up with any. I had none. And I worked really hard at trying to figure out what I was feeling, because I wasn't feeling anything. It took quite a while. It took quite a while for me to get past the just having one feeling. And one of the ways that I got rid of that, just feeling angry all the time, is I guess I was doing a 4-step, or I was listening to a 5th step, or I was somehow doing some sort of inventory something, and I'm constantly working the steps, even still. I thought I was going to get them in 12 days. I was going to do 1 step a day and then be done. I didn't have a lot of time for this. I told you I was important. So I was going to, just get these steps taken care of and be over with it. And God, I heard somebody say in a meeting one night that recovery is a process. And I'm like, no. I thought it was an event with a beginning, a middle, and an end. I want to be done. Am I ever? No. And so now I know, no, I'm recovering. I'm not ever going to finish it up. But anyway, I had this insight into myself, and I thought that it was my husband who was so angry in our house while he was drinking. And our house just kind of pulsed with this anger. In the August, I came to the program in October. That August is his birthday and my birthday, and a friend came by and brought a gift for kind of us jointly. And I opened the door, and they just sort of handed it to me. They wouldn't come in. Nobody came to our house anymore by the time I got to the program. And we used to have practically a revolving door on the house. Nobody came, and I couldn't even get anybody in the house. My daughter wouldn't come. She had called me up, and this is one of the reasons I knew I had to get him to quit drinking and do the intervention, because she had called and she said, I'm not coming home anymore if he's still drinking. So now I was going to lose my daughter. But anyway, when I was doing this little 4-step thing, or however this revelation came to me, I remembered that when I was about 8 years old, my parents, we lived on a ranch, and we had a little bitty house that we lived in, and there was 5 of us in the family, and my parents built a separate building that was like my sister's and my bedroom outside. It was separate from the house, not far away, but right there. And it had a door that locked. We never locked anything. Nothing had a lock on the ranch. And the first day that room was finished, it was our room. We're sharing. She's my older sister. She's kind of bossy. She locked me out. My room. So I stood with my back to the door, and I kicked the door until I kicked a hole in it. I'm 8, and my anger was just already destructive. And when I remembered that, I thought, oh my God, it's not him that's angry, it's me. All of the anger in our house is me. He's happily drunk and in a blackout. I'm the one that's flailing around the house, and I reflected. I did an inventory, kind of, not formal, written down or anything, but I just kind of took a look at my behavior over the years and the damage that had been done to the house. Like, who ripped the phone off the wall? Who slammed the door and the window fell? Had a window, and the window fell out. And I used to do that when I was in high school. I started doing that before alcoholism. That's me. Who punched their fist into the dashboard of the car and broke the control panel? All of the damage was me. Who shoved him into the door and broke the hinges off? He never put hands on me. I was aghast. I was floored when I saw myself. Thank God I have a great sponsor, had a great sponsor, I still do. And I was able to do it, to do the 4th and the 5th and the 6th and 7th step on it. So, like I said when I started at the beginning, it's me that qualifies me for Alanon. And I continue to qualify on a regular basis. So I'm here. I'm coming back. So I got here. I got to Alanon. I spent my 3 weeks in the hospital. I did all the stuff in 3 weeks that everybody else did in 6 weeks. We had to write out a first step, I'd write stuff about the first step and the second step, and we prayed all the time about the third step and turning our will and our life over. And then we had to do what they called an autobiography, which basically is the beginning of a 4th step. It's kind of looking back on your life and writing about your life. And so I did that when I was in the hospital, and I have saved this 4th step because if he ever needs one, I've got it written down, because I completely went through all this stuff, and everything is what he did and what I had to do because of what he did. So it's really a stinky 4th step, but what I've learned about the steps is there's no perfect way to work them. It's just the willingness and doing it. That was the best I could do at that time, but I did it. And then I read that 4th step to my group, and I knew I was going to read it to my group because we knew what the rules were ahead of time. We're going to write this thing, this auto, and then we're going to read it to our group. So when I was writing it, I made sure that my group was going to really understand how hard I had had it and be so sympathetic. And they were. Man, they fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. But it really is a stinkola 4th step. And then after I did that 5th with my group, I went down to the little chapel in the hospital and prayed, and I asked God to remove my shortcomings, which I didn't have any. And I told God, I said, you don't have very much to do here. But the little bit of fixing up that I need, I'm willing. And I was as willing as I could be at the time. I was as willing as I could be. So I came home from the hospital, and I immediately went to Alanon. I don't remember what the date was, but the date that I count as coming to the program was the date we did the intervention. So I immediately went to Alanon. I remember some of the people that were in that first meeting. Some of you know them. Janet was there, and Isla was there. Someone had a little dog. I remember a little dachshund that they held. It was upstairs in a house across from the hospital in Hanford, across from Sacred Heart Hospital. The room was dark, and that's when they asked me if I was new. No. I'd been to a meeting in Long Beach. Did I need any literature? And I didn't need any literature, because when I went to the meetings in the Long Beach area, every time I saw a piece of literature that looked different than something I'd picked up before, I got it. I loved our literature. I still do. And the reason why, and it's the same way that everything in the program is why I love it, because nobody was lecturing me. Our literature is written by us. It's just someone's experience, strength, and hope. It's nobody that sat over here in the corner with some doctorate degree or something, studying us, and then telling us what we need to do. It's just people sharing what they did. And I can take it or leave it. But I just love our literature. To this day, I just think it's the best stuff. Well, except for something we read in a meeting the other night. So I started coming to our meetings, and like I said, I was real busy when I got here because I was running the city. I was running the office that I worked in, and part of running the city meant being on extra boards and commissions and things. Like I was the representative of the Chamber of Commerce and to the Waste Management Board and to LAFCO. I had meetings every day. I did not think my life was unmanageable because I could show you my calendar. Every minute of every day was accounted for. I had it scheduled. I thought a schedule meant management. But somehow I found time to go to 11 meetings a week. And I still did all that other stuff too. I didn't sleep a lot. But I went to an early morning, like a 6:30 a.m. AA meeting, and I had a really great boss that if I took a long lunch hour, it didn't matter. So on days when there were noontime meetings, I could go to a noontime meeting. Hanford had an Alanon lunchtime meeting. I went to a meeting every night somewhere. There were lots of meetings back then. Hanford had 2 or 3 meetings a week. There was a meeting out at the air station. I think Lemoore had a meeting in the library. And I drove to a lot of meetings. And then I took commitments in all the meetings. I had to. I got a sponsor when I first got home. I asked Janet to be my sponsor, Janet B. from Hanford, but I never called her until something happened and I handled it, and then I would call her and tell her how wonderfully I had done it. And, but somewhere I was getting the message that if I wanted to get well, I needed to get into service, do this 12-step thing. I didn't want to get well because there was nothing wrong with me, but these Alanon meetings were so disorganized and they needed to be fixed. So I was making the coffee in one meeting because they had really crappy coffee. I had to take care of that. I did literature in another meeting because the literature was a mess when they put it out, and plus they didn't have everything. I had to order at least one of everything, and we have a lot of literature. And then another meeting, you know, they couldn't get somebody to take the treasury commitment, so I took that one. So this is what I was doing. And then immediately I got into service at the district level, and I started coming to the district meetings in Fresno. And oh my God, the district really needed to be fixed. I could not wait to be the district rep. But they didn't even have a damn gavel. How do you have a meeting without a gavel? You know? And they would talk endlessly. They couldn't stick to an agenda. Everybody had to say something. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So then I got into trying to run the district. They never, ever let me be the DR. This is the craziest program, though, because like one of the things that I did in my youth, my crazy youth, when I was married to my first husband, is I stole stuff. You know, I did a lot of shoplifting. It was what we did. We all did it. We thought it was cute. It was funny. It was fun. And I got caught. So I had this little thing on my record, but I got it expunged. So if you Google me, it's not going to show up. And when I shared that in a meeting that night, they elected me treasurer. I'm telling you, everything here is the opposite of anything I ever learned. And that's how I worked the program. I was very confrontational when I came. That sort of fit in with being angry. I tried to use confrontational as a feeling word, but that didn't pass muster. They said that's not a feeling, that's an action. And I argued with everything. Just like the other night, I thought maybe I'd gotten better, and I have gotten a little better because I didn't like this passage that we were reading and transforming our lives. And it was something about the grieving process, and, you know, if you're going through a rough patch, you know, maybe you'll want to take a break from, you know, your Alanon service stuff and this. And I'm like, bullshit. No, never, ever stop. This is what fixes us. We don't back away from it. If I were to stop coming to meetings, you know, temporarily, take a break because I'm too sad to come, I'll just sit home by myself and think. And alcoholism wants me to be alone. It likes me when I'm on my own. It likes me when I'm thinking. So anyway, I took exception with this stuff that we were reading, shared about it in the meeting just like I used to do when I was new. But the improvement is I didn't write to the WSO to tell them what they needed to correct. Both WSO and AA General Services have received letters from me when I was new. They just needed to fix up some of this stuff. That AA Big Book, it has some of those antique words in it. It's like, you got to fix this thing up. And then our literature had typos and things, you know, I had to point all those things out. So I would argue our meetings were perfect for me because they were small, maybe 8 to 12 people most of the time, sometimes a little bit bigger. There was plenty of time to share. We could share more than once. And I could argue with everything that I read, everything that somebody said. I could say that's never going to work, you know. And I can remember Isla and Janet, they would just smile and say, keep coming back. And they probably were hoping that they would never see me again. But I did keep coming back. My higher power made sure I kept coming back. Like I said, since there was nothing wrong with me, I didn't need to be here. But God took care of me because I couldn't take care of myself. So then I was going to tell you, the way that I worked the program was to, I did everything everybody suggested that I do. Stupid stuff. What could this possibly have to do with what's going on in my house? Why would setting up the chairs for a meeting do anything? You know, why would reading this particular passage have anything to do with what he is doing? Why should I pray every day? God never listened to me anyway. But I did all of this stuff to prove that it wasn't going to work. I would go home and I'd think, all right, I'm going to do this stupid thing, and then I'll come back next week and I'll tell them it didn't work. So I still work the program that way. It does not matter how you work the program. I'm living proof of that. It just matters that you work it. I'm still working it that way, and I am still waiting to come back and tell you all that that stupid suggestion did not work. They always work. Here's the latest one I got from my sponsor. I have a new sponsor. Some of you know her, Kim H. She lives over in the Monterey area now, but she's from Fresno. Raw Serenity. And so when I got her as a sponsor, she said, we're going to work the steps again, which I whined about. I mean, how many times do I have to do this? And one day I was talking to her about my golf game. I'm a golfer. And I said I was just playing like crap, and didn't even want to go anymore. And she's like, look, Barbara, why don't you turn over your golf game? Like we try to turn over everything else. Every shot, just let God know he's in charge of the shot, and that you'll just go along with the result. Wherever the ball goes, that's where he wants it, is fine. I'm like, oh, good grief. What can that have to do? That is not going to fix my golf game. I need a lesson. It's something in my grip. It's something in my set. So I'm like, oh, yeah, I'll do that. And so then I thought, all right, I'll go and do that. And then I'm calling her, next week, and I'm telling her this sucked. So I went golfing. I turned over every shot, and I had one of the best games I've ever had. And I do that now I let God golf all the time. Why not? It's a miraculous program. I don't know what time it is. I brought my phone because I was going to set a timer on myself. Oh, it's time for me to quit. Here's the answer when somebody says, how does Alanon work? Very well, thank you. That's how it works. That's how it has worked for me. I have not been a shining example of Alanon. I have simply tried to do what people suggested that I do. I was never told I had to do anything. Oh, I would have walked out the room on that one. It's a gentle, loving program. It bothers me when people who know nothing about the program make nasty jokes about it. There's some Alanon jokes out there that aren't nice, and I hear them from AA podiums once in a while, and it kind of torques me off. So then I usually go and talk to the speaker afterwards. And old habits die hard. But I just want to encourage everyone to do the one thing that really, really does work, and that is to keep coming back. Because like I said, alcoholism wants me to be alone. It wants me to be in my head thinking, and I'm just going to get sicker and sicker if I do that. So I'm much better than I was when I arrived. My daughter actually said to me one day, Mom, you're nicer. And I said something to someone in a meeting one time. Something was going on that didn't go along with the traditions, and we all have to kind of take care of the traditions and make sure that Alanon stays Alanon. And I said something, and somebody after the meeting said to me, God, you were really tactful. That word would have never been attached to me when I came. Usually if something was going on, I would say, that's bullshit, you can't do that. There was no tact here. So God has worked wonderfully in my life, brought wonderful people into my life, all of you. Now I have new friends and my old ones who are still here. And it's just an honor to be here with you all. I thank you so much for inviting me and letting me share. Thank you.